On the broadcast tonight, the election of a new pope, the first ever from the Americas, the first Jesuit. He will be known as Pope Francis, the Cardinal from Argentina. Tonight, his debut to the world, beginning with an act of humility. The reaction from Rome, from Latin America, from around the world and across the United States. And the job ahead for this 76-year-old man after an extraordinary day in the Catholic Church. Nightly News begins now.
Election of the Pope. This is NBC Nightly News with Brian Williams.
Good evening. He is the first named Francis, the first from Latin America, the first Jesuit. The cardinals of the Catholic Church, voting in secret, elected a 76-year-old colleague as the head of their church of over 1 billion people worldwide. Tonight, biographers are rushing to fill in the gaps, the details of his life. This man with a degree in chemistry who served as a cardinal in Buenos Aires, where he lived a modest life and is known as something of a champion for the poor. His first act today was one of humility, asking for a blessing in his new role with a deep bow to the audience. He takes over during what our Vatican analyst calls a hinge point for the Catholic Church, in the midst of a crisis, shaken in this country by an abuse scandal, now anxious to begin a new era starting tonight. We begin with our team covering it all at the Vatican. Ann Thompson was in St. Peter's Square for the big moment today. Ann, good evening.
Good evening, Brian. This was a surprise in a month that has been full of them, starting with Pope Benedict's decision to do something unheard of, retire, to today's choice of a cardinal from the New World. He is an unexpected choice and a historic one. Cardinal Jorge Mario Bergoglio, now Pope Francis, is the first Jesuit pontiff and the first pope from Latin America, where 40% of the world's Catholics live.
It was a great recognition by the church that it's not Eurocentric anymore.
The announcement came at the end of a long, rainy day. Thousands of people huddled under umbrellas in St. Peter's Square, looking up at the chimney on the roof of the Sistine Chapel. The morning brought black smoke. The tension of the afternoon broken by seagulls, who took turns sitting on the chimney long enough to trend on Twitter. Then just after 7 o'clock here, the sight the world waited for, igniting an hour-long celebration.
Habemus Papam.
But when his name was announced,
Sancte Romani Ecclesiae Cardinalem Bergoglio,
there was an audible gasp in the square, a sense of confusion. Bergoglio was not one of the cardinals that had captured Rome's attention. Stepping out on the balcony,
per lui, perché il Signore lo benedica,
the humble Argentine led the people in prayer.
questa preghiera de voi su di me.
Then asked the crowd of more than 100,000 to silently pray for him.
Jesus Christus ad vitam aeterna.
Pope Francis is the choice of cardinals said to be divided into two factions. The reformers, who want to clean up the Vatican's dysfunctional bureaucracy and focus on bringing new energy to this global institution, and the old guard, who want to maintain the status quo.
I think he does belong in the reformer category. I think he picks up the mantle in many ways of John Paul II. I think he is someone of the new evangelization.
An enthusiastic welcome for a new leader, now charged with steering the church through a crucial moment in history. Now, we understand from New York's Cardinal Timothy Dolan that Pope Francis tomorrow will go to Castel Gandolfo to visit Benedict, Pope Emeritus. And then next Tuesday, Pope Francis will celebrate his first Mass here at St. Peter's. Tuesday is the Feast of St. Joseph, and St. Joseph is the patron saint of the Universal Church. Brian?
And you said two striking things during our live coverage earlier today, and that was how silent it got when he asked for silence, and what it was like as he read the prayer, as he led the group in prayer, and everyone in the square followed along.
It was. The prayers he said, and he said them in Italian, were the Our Father, the Hail Mary, and the Glory Be. And you had more than 100,000 people all joining in those three prayers. And then the Pope asked for a silent prayer for himself. And suddenly all these people went quiet. The only thing I could hear around me, Brian, were the camera shutters going off. But everybody, it was an incredibly reverential moment, a moment that brought all these people from many different countries together in support of this man, this 76-year-old man who is now the 266th pontiff of the Catholic Church. Brian?
Ann Thompson, who had a great perspective this historic day at the Vatican, starting off our coverage. Ann, thanks. And beyond the Vatican, perhaps nowhere is there more joy tonight than in Argentina. There was cheering for Francis in the streets of Buenos Aires. He became a priest in his early 30s, and according to his biographer, led a lifestyle that was, quote, sober and austere. Lester Holt, also at the Vatican tonight, with more on this new pope. Lester, good evening.
Hello, Brian. By many accounts, a quiet man, a simple man. His biographer also said he's a little media shy, but after stepping onto the papal loggia here tonight, the world is clamoring to hear more from and more about Pope Francis. When the Cardinals filed into the Sistine Chapel on Tuesday, he was regarded as a long shot at best. At 76, Jorge Bergoglio was thought by some to be too old. But if his name was unfamiliar and caught most gathered on St. Peter's Square by surprise, there was unabashed joy in Buenos Aires tonight. Jorge Mario Bergoglio is an Argentine-born son of Italian immigrants, one of 5 children. He lost a lung to an infection when he was a teenager, but went on to become a priest in 1969. He joined the Jesuit order, embracing an austere lifestyle. Even as a cardinal and Archbishop of Buenos Aires, he shunned the privileges and trappings that usually come with the job.
He took the tram to work. He lived in a small apartment rather than in the Archbishop's palace. He's not a man of a lot of fuss, pomp, and circumstances.
In 2005, Bergoglio was runner-up behind Joseph Ratzinger to replace the late Pope John Paul II. He is regarded as a strong defender of Catholic doctrine. Described by his biographer as a balancing force, he earned a reputation in Argentina as a fierce advocate for the poor.
This is a man of God, a man of the new evangelization, a man who is a great defender of democracy in a country where democracy is under real stress right now in Argentina.
Tonight, choosing to become Pope Francis, he takes the name of 13th century preacher St. Francis Assisi, who lived a life of poverty. No surprise to those who know him.
You can see the humility of the man. You can see the calm of the man. And I can tell you, I know the strength of the man and the compassion of the man.
His election has sparked excitement in Latin America, both out of cultural pride and the recognition of the growing importance and influence of that part of the world.
Bergoglio brings Latin America to Rome and to the world.
His papacy is expected to reflect his sense of strong social justice, and Brian, he's also expected to bring along a very strong management style.
Lester Holt, part of our team at the Vatican as well. Lester, thanks for that. We want to bring back in a man we just saw, our NBC News Vatican analyst, Jorge Weigel, a veteran journalist, papal biographer, and as you've seen, he's provided us with analysis throughout this and throughout the day. George, I've been quoting your phrase that this is a hinge point for the Catholic Church. Just yesterday in our newscast, word of this $10 million settlement in L.A. Lives have been ruined at the hands of parish priests across our country. So, this man who seems to bridge 2 eras, do you think he is the right figure at age 76 for this hinge point?
He is, Brian. This is a man who has been a reformer his whole life. I think he will take in hand the reform of the Roman Curia. His own simplicity, austerity, and gentleness, I think, will make him a man who can put the church on the road to a new evangelization in the future. This is not an institutional maintenance guy. He comes from a country where the church has had to learn how to be missionary again, and I think he wants the entire church to learn from that experience.
We came close, had real discussions of the first ever African, first ever American. This is the first ever non-European. So certainly this is a history-making choice, and personality, as we saw with John Paul II, means a lot, and he appears to have instant warmth with the people there today.
He is a very, very warm gentleman. I spent an hour with him in Buenos Aires last May. I was touched by his intelligence, by his manifestly deep interior life, his spiritual life. Got a very clear-eyed view of the troubled politics of his own country. And he's been through a lot of sorrow in his own life. So I think this is a man who brings a full package of pastoral skills to the office of Peter. And I think the world is going to get to love this man very quickly.
Our veteran journalist and Vatican analyst, George Weigel, from the Vatican tonight. George, our thanks. This first ever Latin American Pope is a nod to a huge and growing power center in the Church. Hispanics, after all, make up about 40% of all Catholics around the globe. There was, as we said, happiness throughout the region following the announcement today. NBC's Miguel Almaguer is in Rio for us tonight.
Brian, good evening. We have been here in Rio de Janeiro for the last several days where there was anticipation, but tonight there is joy, excitement, pride, and in some places here in Latin America, even tears in the streets. Catholicism really is a way of life. 40%, 4 out of every 10 Catholics lives right here in this region. From Mexico City to here to Rio to Buenos Aires, many of the faithful believe they'll have a larger voice in the church. Catholics believe that the Pope will pay special attention to the poor. The Pope has been called by some the Pope of the people because of his simple way of life. In Latin America, they have waited 20 centuries for a Pope to come from this region. Tonight, they are certainly celebrating in the streets, saying this was well worth the wait. Brian.
Miguel Almaguer in Rio for us tonight. Miguel, thanks. And we'll take a break. We're back with more of our coverage, including reaction from across this country at a very tricky time for the Church, facing several scandals here at home.